Hi all, the World Chess Championship Candidates Tournament is now on. It's between March the 11th and the 29th, played in Moscow, Russia. The candidates are Topalov, Giri, Anand, Nakamura, Caruana, Karyakin, Svidler and Aronian. So the winner will play a match for the title against the reigning World Chess Champion, Magnus Carlsen, next November in the United States. So one of the more exciting games of the round I'm going to show you was Vishy Anand against Veselin Topalov, played on the 11th of March 2016, which is yesterday from the time of this video. So Vishy Anand kicked off with e4 and we went into a Roy Lopez actually. So Topalov playing this solid knight f6 here. Quite usual is casting or knight c3 here. This is also very common, d3. We have bishop c5, white castles, d6, c3, pretty standard stuff. White is aiming potentially to construct a centre and later play d4. Black castled, knight bd2, knight e7, and now we see this d4 move, so establishing the 2 pawns in the centre. E takes, c takes, bishop goes back to b6, and here we have rook e1, and black exerts more pressure now on d4 with this pin, bishop g4, so threatening actually potentially to take this pawn. H3, kicking that bishop immediately, bishop h5, and here actually a4 was played. In the event of bishop takes d4, I think g4 refutes that. So if bishop takes d4 here, you might be wondering. Let's just one moment to check this. G4 I think is a good reply here to win a piece. There isn't enough compensation for black. This position is a piece down for black. So yeah. So a6 was played. We have bishop f1. And again, yeah, this g4 mechanism is against bishop takes d4. We have rook e8. a5. So given bishop takes d4 is not viable, we have bishop a7. And now actually queen b3, getting out of the pin and hitting b7. Black ignored this. He let b7 go. Very energetic move here. Played knight c6, just putting more pressure on d4, letting that go. But white doesn't really want to take this here. This would be quite pleasant. If white takes on b7, it's like swapping a centre pawn for a flank pawn. Black will get that important centre pawn, and this would be very nice for black with c5 and d5 as prospects. So instead we have d5, knight d4, knight takes, bishop takes, and now white grabs that pawn. Is this materialistic? Has white neglected his king? Is he going to win a6? Interesting position. If black routinely plays rook b8 here, well, it doesn't seem to do much after queen takes a6. There is knight takes d5, but white will be in good shape here. This position is in good shape for white. So I think Topalov, rightly, he generates quite a bit of play now with knight d7 potentially. It unleashes the queen to come to h4 to put more pressure on f2. And we have knight c4, knight c5. And it looks very energetic for black, this position. Queen c6. And here, in fact, white might be in a little bit of trouble technically, but Topalov played knight b3 here. This is probably a critical position. He hits the rook in this position. And perhaps it's interesting to consider in this position as an attacking possibility, which the engines pick up. I wonder if you can guess it as a tactical test. If you were playing black here, what would you think is quite interesting? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, starting from now. Right, there's a very interesting continuation here. Bishop takes f2 check, which might not be entirely unsound. It does bring the king out to play. After the check here, the king cannot retract without losing the rook. And if g3, knight takes e4 is check, and the attack continues. White doesn't want to lose g3 next, so if white takes, this is an interesting position for black here. This is an example line where black is getting some opportunities to weaken white's king and get some pins going. And yeah, it seems like the engines like this for black overall, this kind of position, which could have been a consequence. As an example, white's king safety is a bit precarious. I think it might be easier to play for black, but yeah, very complex continuation. Instead, knight b3 was played. So the rook moves. Now knight takes, rook b takes, and we have rook b8 now, which lets a6 go. But isn't this quite dangerous for f2 still? We have queen h4 threatening bishop f2 and queen f2. There's no g3 here, by the way, because if queen takes g3 check using the pin. So we have rook c2. And now black gets a pawn back, but it's still a pawn down. Knight e3 now. A cool move, actually. It threatens knight f5, which would kick the queen and later take the rook. It looks pretty dangerous for black, losing material here under some certain circumstances. Queen goes all the way back. Not a good sign. Queen c4 creating a pin here, paralyzing the bishop. Bishop d6. Bishop d3. Rook f4. That's some simplification. And white's king has seemingly not been under a major assault, and white is left with this outside pass pawn at the moment. Rook e4. a6. Queen e8. e3 under fire now, threatening that. So we have a clever reply here. Rook c e2. So there'll be a potential counterpin on e8 here. On bishop takes e3. Rook takes e3, counterpinning. So the bishop drops back. Instead, queen d3. And yeah, this looks like a problem now. It looks as though there are all sorts of interesting possibilities for white. Rook a8. We have king g2. Queen a4, holding the rook still from there. b3, trying to nudge the queen away. A counter-attack now on white's queen. If here, then this looks good. Knight c2, hitting the queen. So a counter-attack instead. Rook d4. White takes. Rook takes. The problem with this position, even though that pawn's a goner, it seems white's pawns are weak, it's black's king safety which becomes a factor now quite rapidly in the position after knight c4, with the white rooks threatening to infiltrate on the a flank and coordinate. The double pawns do not contribute to a better king safety here in certain variations. Black gets that pawn on a6, but well, that's a major nuisance. Now, a very clever move, a5, preserving this pawn, so at the very least equal on pawns, because if black dares take this pawn, he didn't, he played bishop d4. If he dares take this pawn, then this mighty pin, this continuation, would end up losing that to that pin, and that would be good for white. So we have bishop d4, and the rooks crash through though, check, and another one crashes through. So a lot of pressure laterally on the 7th rank. Here, as though f2 is a problem. So knight d2, with the idea of knight e4 protecting f2 for a moment, and also knight g5. Very clever stuff. Knight e4 here. Knight g5 check and knight takes f7 is nasty. f6. And if black gets time for g5, then maybe there's an escape exit via g6. White puts an end to that h4. Going to punish any g5. Black takes time to take this pawn, but the time there is useful for white for the attack. Rook f7 with the main idea rook f8, h8 mating. g5. Does white want to take? No, the escape exit is closed. h5 still threatening rook f8 mating. So the escape exit of the king is stopped. Black tries here. Rook takes f2 check. It looks like quite a clever resource to distract white. Knight takes. Rook a2. An exchange sack. But nevertheless, the mate is still threatened. And white is the exchange up here. The king goes to h3. Yeah, it's a problem position here for black. If he tries g6, I mean, it just gets mated with rook e7 check, because the king is stopping this exit, so this kind of thing is not very nice. So the desperate g4 check is tried. That's just taken. Still this mating net is there. f5 check. And even better than king g5, which would allow bishop f6, even though white's still better. After takes, white's still better, but even better just to take with the rook here, leaving white the exchange up. And this is hopelessly lost for black. It'll be easy to mount the pressure here. c7 will be a target in the ending. So Topalov resigned here at move 49. So it was the first decisive game of this year's candidates tournament. So Anand's actually taking the lead with this game win, this decisive game. Okay, I hope you found this game quite interesting. There were some opportunities, it seems, for Topalov, namely the bishop takes f2 check, a very sharp possibility, which exists in this game. But yeah, if that was an improvement, I think the engines indicate that, well, at least that might be the improvement for black's play, because it did seem a bit cheeky to take the pawn on b7 and leave the king from a fundamental point of view. But how to concretely try and get an opportunity from that requires quite a lot of calculation. But yeah, this bishop takes f2 check early on would seem it was the logical thing to counterbalance white winning material on the queen side. Once white had won that material on the queen side, he was actually using them as positional sacrifices to gain time for an attack, letting one of the pawns go and the other one tactically kept intact until a bit longer, but it let white's attack brew just that little bit longer to weave a decisive mating net. So quite an exciting game, and maybe some lessons there for us all. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.